President Trump, in the last few moments, has slammed Ukraine's President Zelenskyy as a dictator without elections. In the past few minutes, he has posted this on his Truth Social platform. Let me just take you through some of the detail. Quite a lengthy post, as you can see there. He says that President Zelenskyy refuses to have elections, is very low in Ukrainian polls. He's claiming that President Zelenskyy has about a 4% rating. Polls suggest it's 57%. He goes on, the only thing he was good at was playing Biden like a fiddle. He then calls President Zelenskyy a dictator without elections. Zelenskyy better move fast or he is not going to have a country left. He goes on, in the meantime, we're successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something all admit only Trump and the Trump administration can do. Biden never tried, he claims. Europe has failed to bring peace, and Zelenskyy probably wants to keep the gravy train going. President Trump goes on, I love Ukraine, but Zelenskyy has done a terrible job. His country is shattered and millions have unnecessarily died.
What is happening? I mean, BBC is losing it. The reporter is losing it. UK, right now, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, he wants to send troops in Ukraine. He doesn't want this killing to stop in Ukraine. Therefore, it was expected when BBC was coming out with this kind of report, blasting Donald Trump for his position on Zelenskyy. The reality of it is that Zelenskyy is a dictator. He's not famous. He's not popular in Ukraine. He made the Ukrainian people to suffer. He was a puppet of Joe Biden of the West. And that cost thousands of Ukrainian men and women to die. And this was absolutely not necessary.
And so it continues. He also calls Volodymyr Zelenskyy a moderately successful comedian, talking America into spending billions of dollars to go into a war that couldn't be won. He says the US has spent $200 billion more than Europe, and Europe's money is guaranteed, while the US will get nothing back. Well, all of this happening now as a number of discussions continue about the future of Ukraine, some of them without Ukraine involved. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin has delivered a pretty positive verdict on Tuesday's talks between the US and Russia. Those are the talks that took place in Saudi Arabia, saying he rates them highly. Speaking to reporters earlier, Mr. Putin said the purpose of that meeting was to increase trust. He said he is happy to meet President Trump, and there has been some indication in Moscow today it could even be as early as this month. He says he expects Ukraine will take part in talks at some point.
Yes, I have been informed. I rate them highly. There are results. The first thing I would like to say is that we have agreed to resume the normal work of diplomatic agencies. The constant expulsion of diplomats from Washington and Moscow does not lead to anything good. If this goes on, only cleaners will work in these buildings, whose work should be also appreciated. But this is not what diplomatic missions are created for.
Ukraine's leader, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, had earlier said President Trump was living in a bubble of Russian disinformation. Ukraine was excluded from those talks in Saudi Arabia between America and Russian officials. And here is President Zelenskyy speaking earlier.
Since we are talking about 4%, we have seen this disinformation. We understand that it is coming from Russia. We understand and we have evidence that these numbers are being discussed between America and Russia. It is unfortunate that President Trump, and with great respect for him as the leader of the American people who constantly support us, unfortunately lives in this disinformation space.
Joining me now, our correspondent Nomia Iqbal, who's in Washington, and also to Vitaly Shevchenko from BBC Monitoring, who's been following Putin's remarks. But first to Nomia. Nomia, one of my guests earlier was saying that we have to pay attention to what President Trump does rather than what he says, but there does seem to be a war of words at the moment, and certainly looking at those latest comments on his Truth Social platform. What's your analysis of what he said?
Well, yeah, I think that that's not, entirely incorrect. It's what he does, not what he says. But what he says is hugely significant. Do remember he's in his last term in office. But look, I don't think anyone was under the illusion that things were going to be under President Trump as they were under President Biden when it comes to Ukraine. His comments are still pretty extraordinary. They're very long, but the fact that it's important to sort of first of all stress that Kyiv last held an election in 2019, has been unable to stage another one since Russia's invasion in early 2022. But saying he's a dictator without elections is quite extraordinary, because I don't think that those are words he'd necessarily use about the Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, I think that's something that has stood out with Donald Trump again. It was similar to his first term. He seems to criticise everyone but Putin. I mean, last week, Mr. Trump had accused President Joe Biden of starting the war in Ukraine. He wants to have this closer alignment to Russia. I think there was always an expectation that he was going to say something. He's in Miami at the moment on a business meeting, but it's not particularly helpful considering he's got his special...
Okay, so calling Zelensky a dictator and not calling Putin as a dictator, why would he call Putin a dictator when Putin in Russia, he has been successful in so many ways? He brought Russia and its economy to a fourth strongest in the world. Did Zelensky do that? Under Putin, Russia has developed its nuclear arsenal, also its military, and it is exporting now S-400 systems like S-500 to countries like India, Turkey, Iran, and all throughout the world. Because of Putin, the NATO, they respect Russia. I don't think that it was important for Trump to point out in this context that Putin was a dictator and that he should go. I mean, even if he calls Putin a dictator, he's not going to say, oh, Putin, you need to go. Your approval rating is low. Why would he go? Because the people of Russia, they did not come out in masses to protest against Putin. We have not seen that. But on the contrary, we have seen how Zelensky's popularity tanked, even though according to BBC, his popularity is sitting as 57%. But these are all fake numbers. We do not know what is happening in the military of Zelensky. A lot of these are deserting their positions. They're going back home. They're fleeing the country. They're being most of the time, they're being forced to take part in military activities to fight against Russia. There is absolutely no reason for Donald Trump or anybody for that matter to praise Zelensky. All he did throughout this whole war, the last 2-3 years, was listening to Joe Biden and Keir Starmer using their weapon against Russia, which could have ended up having a nuclear war against Russia. Russia used Oreshnik missile system, but they threatened in the past that we are going to go after Ukraine with our nukes if Ukraine allows, or if Ukraine uses those weapons, ATACMS or Storm Shadow missiles from UK and US. Therefore, the risk of a World War III was always there, as long as Joe Biden was backing him up. And now, why would we call all of a sudden this guy a saint? We're talking about Zelensky. Why would he be called as a saint or as someone who wants peace? He doesn't want peace. If he wanted peace, if he wanted to negotiate, he could have said to Joe Biden, hey, look, this is my war, and I think I can negotiate, even though I will not win everything, but at least let this war stop, let this killing stop. But instead, he actually filled his pocket with billions and billions of dollars. His minions, his followers, his administration, Zelensky, all of these people, they were benefited from this war, and they're still getting benefited from this war. They're receiving billions and billions of dollars. So now all of a sudden you have Donald Trump calling Zelensky out. It makes sense because U.S. has spent billions of dollars. How much he gave? 200 billion? Well, I'm sure the number is even higher. But Zelensky is in no way, shape, or form a leader who wants peace or negotiation, because he can't. He doesn't have any power. His strings is was with Joe Biden, and now partly of it is with Keir Starmer, the warmongers in the West. Zelensky right now, he really needs to step down, resign, and never show his face to the people of Ukraine because of what he caused Ukraine to go through.